So much for joining us this evening. My name is Emma. I'm from the Yinova Center, and I'll be helping moderate this event. Before we dive into our discussion on sex, stress, and intimacy, for those of you who are new to either Simone or Jill, I wanted to let you know a bit more about our speakers. Simone is a sex and intimacy coach serving women, men, non-binary individuals, and couples throughout the world. A certified life coach, Simone received her Bachelor's of Art from the University of California in Santa Cruz. After traveling throughout the world and birthing her son, she realized the importance of developing one's connection to self and the feminine collective. She continued her studies and became a certified vinyasa yoga teacher, certified life coach, as well as trained as a doula, meditation leader, somatica practitioner, and sexological body worker. Simone is also the founder of The Pleasure Plus, an online community, and an upcoming podcast called Sex Evolution. Then we have Dr. Jill Blakeway, who is an acupuncturist and herbalist, as well as the founder of Yinova, where she's been treating patients for over 2 decades. Jill has always been passionate about supporting people's reproductive health and credits much of her success to combining the ancient wisdom of Chinese medicine with modern conventional biomedicine. She's the author of several books, one of which focuses on libido, called Sex Again. I know many of you sent over some questions prior to this discussion, which we are looking forward to diving into and answering. You can also feel free to submit questions throughout this discussion via the Q&A section down at the bottom there. After this event, we'll send you a follow-up email with more information on the topics we covered this evening, as well as how to get in touch with our speakers. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Simone and Jill to get started.
Well, thank you, Emma, and welcome, Simone. I'm so happy to do this with you. It's such an important topic, I think, and something that I get a lot of questions about from my patients. And I think we're going to just dive in and answer questions because we got some ahead of time, and I think they'll resonate with a lot of people. But I wanted to just flesh out a little bit before we do that, Simone, your thoughts on sex and the way that you coach people. And I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that, because it's lovely to meet you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here. I love what you guys are all about, and I'm so happy to be talking about sex because it's so important. It's part of our biological calling. It's part of our pleasure. It's so fun and so amazing, and it's definitely a great way to de-stress during these times and any time, really. But my connection to this work is just through a life of experiences in which I have always been a super sensual and embodied person, but because of society and cultural and norms, I kind of derailed from what my true sexual essence was. And after studying all the things that I've studied that you mentioned so sweetly, Emma, I realized the importance of really being in our pleasure center and really understanding the body as a whole. So yeah, I think there's a really large gap in what sex is. You know, we think of just penetrative sex, but there's so much more to that. And that's everything from just foreplay to communicating with your body to staring at a lover through their eyes and connecting in intimacy. Yeah, so that's just a little bit and ways that we can plunge into the topic of connecting right now in these times.
Thank you. So I came to write about sex because my first book was about fertility, and my fertility patients were having to have sex on a schedule, which takes a lot of the spontaneity out of it, and were starting to feel very beleaguered. And so I wrote a book based on ancient Taoist practices about energetic connection. And interestingly, when I wrote my last book, which is called Energy Medicine, The Science and Mystery of Healing, I began to understand that we are silently collaborating with each other the whole time. So there are studies that show that people's heart waves show up in other people's brain waves when they're connected. And there was even a study at the University of Connecticut where they put 2 people in separate MRIs, and when one thought healing, loving thoughts about the other, their brainwaves synced up, even though they were in separate rooms. And so I'm very interested in the energetic connection of sex, and that includes your energetic connection to yourself, not necessarily with a partner. But I do think that sex with a partner is one of our few experiences of energetic merging and oneness. And I think people instinctively understand from a spiritual perspective that they are one at some level, that we are exactly the same thing, but we don't get to experience it very often. And sex is one of the more accessible ways we do. So for me, this is an important discussion to have. I love talking to younger women about their sex lives. I regret how many years I wasted with shame because of society and the, you know, the very thing that you were talking about, that women are brought up to be somewhat ashamed of their sexuality. You actually shake that off as you get older, but I would like people to do that younger. And with that, Emma, I wonder if you want to ask us a question. I know we had some ahead of time.
Yeah, we did have a few sent ahead of time. Also, if you have any questions throughout this, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A section, and I'll read them out loud for you. So one of the questions we got was very relevant to the context that we're in right now, which is, how can I enjoy intimacy even when living in a small one-bedroom apartment and working and living together 24/7 in these COVID times?
Oh, it's such a good question. Simone, do you want to handle that first, and I'll do it after you?
I love this question. I mean, gosh, how to connect in a one bedroom, small apartment. So many of us are doing this right now. And I think it starts with communication with your partner, really, you know, getting to know what the core desires that you have, like what excites you, what turns you on. Like if you haven't had that conversation with your partner right now, this is a great time to discuss that and share a little bit more vulnerably, like what it is that you're wanting, what your turn-ons are, and what your turn-offs are, so that you can align more quickly. And then just have fun with it. Like be curious, like play around the house, you know, get into having quickies, or just, it doesn't have to be some like long thought out process of getting into sex. I think it can be something that's just fun and light. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly penetrative sex the way we think about it. It can be masturbating together. It can be telling your partner you're going to masturbate by yourself and you need a few minutes, and then, you know, if they come and connect with you, then that's a great opportunity for intimacy. But if they don't, they don't. Like, you know, you might want to just feel that yumminess right then.
Well, I like this question because my patients tell me, I mean, people are feeling a bit claustrophobic. If you're in a small New York apartment, both working from home, by now you are claustrophobic, and it is a bit of a passion killer. And here's one of the things that I think goes on and sort of threatens intimacy. I think we start by losing our boundary a little bit, and we start giving in on things and letting things go. But part of loving someone is letting things go, but we're less authentic somehow as we try and make this work. And I think then people start to put up boundaries to intimacy out of resentment. But the problem was a little further back, if you see what I mean, and things needed to be voiced. And so I would start with allowing yourself, without blame or making fault, to state your preferences and give yourself the permission to be wholly, authentically you, full on. And then you need to give your partners the same permission, yeah, to be themselves full on. And just doing that is intimate. And then once you've established a bit of safety with that, I think some touch is good. That doesn't have to be going in a sexual direction necessarily, but touch is very connecting. Rubbing shoulders at the end of the day, something nice like that, kissing, holding hands still, which when you're stuck at home you possibly don't do, but you could when you're watching Netflix. And I think that's the beginning of sort of rekindling that when you've started to get a bit stale at home. But I would look out for the little resentments that come in when your boundaries get violated and you've talked yourself into the fact it isn't a big deal, and then you shut down in other ways. And I think that happens to people. I know that happens to me actually, and I think that's a common experience. Do we have another question?
Yeah, that was super interesting. Thank you, both of you.
You're welcome.
So one of the other questions that we got was, how do I stop from feeling just uninterested? So what would be your advice, I guess, on reigniting that flame and feeling that interest?
Yes. Well, I think I'll take this one first, and then I'll pass it to Simone because I think she'll have nice fun suggestions. But I think you have to start by working out a little bit why you're not interested, because there are lots of reasons why you're not interested. And I think it's also important to say that, particularly in a long relationship, sex ebbs and flows, and it's fine. Do you mean like it comes back a little bit, and sometimes you're bringing up small children and you're distracted. And I've been with my husband for over 20 years. In the overall plan of things, you sort of get back on track. But are you not interested because you're exhausted? A lot of people tell me by the time I've put the kids to bed, it is literally the last thing I want to do. And I understand, in which case, we need to start finding times that aren't at the end of the day necessarily, and making some kind of space for it. Are you not interested because you have bought something about yourself? Women talk to me about the jiggly bit under their arms and, their muffin top and things like that. And we are bombarded with sexual images of photoshopped perfection. And it can be very bad for our morale. The truth is, I think, because I treat men too, is that they are not judging you half as much as you are judging yourself, but it's easy to feel unsexy. And then if you feel unsexy, you don't feel like having sex. The other thing is, are you harboring resentments? It's hard to let, particularly for women, I think there is something very vulnerable about letting someone in our bodies. And if we are feeling angry, that is not necessarily a comfortable place to be. And so dealing with that, I think, is really important. And then I would say maybe there's something going on. If you're perimenopausal or menopausal, your testosterone may have dropped a little bit. You could be suffering a little bit of loss of sex drive. We can give you Chinese herbs for that, so you should ask us. But I think Simone probably has some fun tips, so I'm going to pass this on to her.
Yeah, I mean, you answered so much of that question. I think, like you stated, first asking yourself, why is it that you're uninterested? Where is that coming from? And is there something deeper behind that? And if there is resentments, or if there's a lack of connection with your body, going there first and exploring that. And then also honoring your body, if you're not interested, I don't think any kind of sexual act should ever be forced. Or you should be pushing up against something where you're not feeling it. So really just listen to yourself. And if you haven't been getting enough sleep, if you're bombarded with, all sorts of thoughts about what's going on in the world right now, take that time and nourish those parts of yourself first. And for some of my clients that, are having issues with reaching orgasm or not connecting, I'll say, just take sex completely off the table and just do that for a week, don't make that a thing, and then see where your arousal starts to rise from that point.
I think that's a really good point, actually, Simone, is that you don't have to do it. Don't put pressure on yourself if you don't feel like it. I don't think you should be having sex if you don't feel like it. However, sometimes when your libido goes into a bit of a spiral down, less sex begets less sex. It's amazing how breaking the spiral works for a lot of people. So unless there's something abusive going on in your relationship, in which case there are things to be sorted out ahead of this, I sometimes suggest my patients just have a quickie, and they tell me, oh, you know what? I did feel more connected to my partner all day. I did. And it starts to move it along, because when you stop having sex for a while, you stop thinking about it. And and to me, that's energetic. The energetic connection starts to get a little thin. Whereas if you do keep a regular sex life going, then it's on your mind and you remember how nice it is, even afterwards, to feel connected to another human being in that way.
Yeah, I really love that. And I think that's so true. I remember so many times when I've been like, I have so many thoughts, I can't get there. I don't know. I'm just not in the mood. And then, a lover's with me and we go there. And then after I'm like, oh, like, thank God, like I needed somebody to literally grab me and do that. So I really appreciate that. And something that I also do with my clients is we practice orgasmic yoga. And so that's the practice, just like yoga, practicing every day getting in touch with your body. So this practice is particularly around self-pleasuring, masturbation. And by practicing this every day, like little bits of touching yourself in ways that you don't normally touch yourself. So we're kind of like reprogramming the brain to get out of the patterns that we're so used to. I think that we get into this rut of thinking that sex has to be one way, and that's one of the things that makes it not as interesting. So practicing this and then meeting yourself even when you don't have that like desire, and seeing what comes up there and letting that be okay, but still doing it, like still touching yourself, still doing something intimate with your partner, and just meeting it as it is.
So Emma, I'm going to take a question from the Q&A because I think it's an interesting question and I want to share a practice with you. One of our viewers says, when I'm stressed, I struggle with my mind-body connection, especially with my pelvic floor. And the last few months have been particularly bad. Is there a daily practice that may be helpful? And thank you for asking that question, because you're not alone. I sort of energetically, as I see the body, I think we retreat from areas of our body that and we stop having flow through them. And one of the areas that women often retreat from is their pelvic floor. And I think many of us have had, on a range from mild to severe, traumatic sexual experiences or dishonoring sexual experiences, or we've been made to feel less than, or there has been power taken, our power has been taken away. And it causes a little bit of a retreat from an area where it's better to be embodied. And I see that clinically in some cases of endometriosis, not all by any means, some cases of fibroids. I see it manifest over time. Lack of flow becomes more dense tissue that is less enriched by blood and oxygen, and becomes troublesome. So it's worth sorting out for you. And in Sex Again, I wrote an exercise that was based on an ancient Taoist exercise. The Taoist translation from the Chinese is the microcosmic orbit. I called it the loop because I didn't think the microcosmic orbit sounded very sexy. And if you would like to, we can do it now, all of us. It doesn't require us to take our clothes off or anything, really. But the point is to circulate energy all the way through your body. And over time, you can start to do this while you're masturbating, and you can start to move orgasm through your body so it's not as genitally centered. And once you get good at it, you can do it with a partner and synchronize your breath and take a loop of energy from you to your partner. But let's just, all good sex starts with yourself and your relationship with you. So let's do a meditation and let's do a loop. So I want you to just breathe and take some nice settling breaths into your abdomen. And then I want you to imagine that you have a bowl of warm oil in your pelvis. And from that oil, there is a straw that goes all the way up your backbone to the top of your head. And what I want you to do is breathe in and take the oil all the way up your back in your mind to the top of your head, and then to run down the front of your body and back into the bowl. Breathe in, take the oil to the top of your head. Breathe out, send it down the front and into the bowl. Breathe in, take the oil all the way up to the top of your head. Breathe out and send it back into the bowl. And this time we're going to add a little Kegel. So breathe in and clench your pelvic floor muscles as you send the oil up the straw to the top of your head, and breathe out and relax them as you take it back down the front. And that, you can open your eyes now and we'll come back together. If you spend a few minutes doing that, that is a practice that puts you back in touch with your pelvic floor, but it also integrates the energy of your root chakra with the rest of your body. And so your pelvis, your genitals become more part of you and less a sort of separate place that you visit here and there. And so that's what I think I want for all of us. But that has been my experience about why people retreat from their pelvic floor, is that we've associated our sexuality with shame or power struggles or abuse, and healing that can be extremely profoundly healing for your whole life. What about you, Simone? I bet you have lovely practices to connect people.
Oh, I love that meditation that you just led us through. I feel like glowy and
The
soft.
loop, I love the loop. You
Uh-huh.
can see that you could do it with a partner, and then when they breathe out, they send the energy down your backbone, and when you breathe in, when you breathe out, you send it up theirs, and so you synchronize your breath too. It takes a
Yeah,
little while to, learn that, but it's fun learning.
amazing. Yeah, I love that. I practice that as well, the circular breath movement, and it's
Yes,
very, very yummy
yes,
to do with a partner and with yourself.
yes.
Um, so yeah, that question is great. I think that doing something like that, some kind of meditation where you just drop into your body and where you can connect with what is right now, and then you can put your hand on your pelvis or on your womb, or even just cup your vulva. Just put your hands on that, or if you have a penis, put your hands on your whatever your genitals are. And then just ask that part of your body, what does it have to say? Does it have any messages for you? And create a line of communication. And you'll be really surprised what happens. Like, our body is actually full of very direct and very clear messages. So that seems to be very helpful.
Well, bodies have consciousness. And I always
Mhm.
think, Simone, that that's the part of the body that we just take for granted. But bodies are extraordinarily intelligent, or you wouldn't be alive. And every cell in your body understands its relationship to the cells around it. And every cell is what in Chinese medicine we describe as yin and yang. They're yin aware and yang active. So every cell then takes a decision, and most of the decisions your body makes, which are millions a day, it makes completely outside of your mind, for obvious reasons. Because if you had to remember when to ovulate and pop it in your Google Cal, everything would go awry. But your body is constantly staying in rhythm by being intelligent. And so I always think that my mind in some ways is so much less reliable than my body. If I ask myself how I feel about something, I'm usually clearer to the right answer than what I think, because what I think has come from a lot of pain and past experience, and it's kind of murky. My mind is attempting to prevent future pain by basing it on past experiences and things like that. So you're so right. Just asking your body how, what would feel good, or the question I often ask my patients, and there will be some of my patients here and they'll laugh because I ask this all the time: what would feel delicious? What would feel absolutely delicious? Not just good, but delicious, because we don't get permission to feel delicious, but I actually think it's our birthright. And actually, when you first ask yourself that question, you're like, I don't know what would feel delicious. We're all on lockdown. But you do. What would feel delicious right now? Simone showed me before we all got on that she made herself the most beautiful tea. Do you still have it there,
Oh yeah.
Simone?
Let's see if we
Look at
can.
this. What did you brew up?
It is fresh rosebuds and corn flour, which the scent is amazing. And I just let it sit out in the sun, what little sun there is, and there you go.
It's a
Magic.
simple thing, but it's a very sensual sort of what would feel delicious. What would feel delicious, I think, is to have rosebuds that have been in the sun. And the reason I use that example is because it's not huge necessarily, but we don't ask ourselves that question enough. And maybe we should be asking it about sex, not just what would feel good, but what would feel juicy and delicious, and then let your body take you there. Now, Emma, do we have another question?
We do. We actually had one that came in through the Q&A that I think was maybe from the loop exercise. So the question and comment was, I've heard from a shaman that Kegels may work against our best interest. What are your thoughts on this when dealing with sexual shame, repression, or liberation? Are these helpful in healing, and or does this depend on the individual?
It's an interesting question. And I think the reason that and I've heard this before, it depends. It depends on the individual, but it also depends how you're using the Kegel exercise. And anyone who's had a baby will know that you're taught to do Kegels and you're taught to multitask with them whilst unloading the dishwasher and other things, and do a lot of them. And I think that can sometimes concentrate chi energy in a specific area in a way that may be unhelpful. Although I do think Kegels are very important. I have to say, the healthcare practitioner, because you do not want to get older and then be suffering from stress incontinence. So, you know, there's a definite plus to doing your Kegel exercises. But the exercise I showed you there was specifically to move that energy through the body. And I think energetically, you'll have to ask your shaman whether that's okay. But to me, just as an energy worker myself, that feels like a lot of movement rather than just a lot of concentrated energy in the genitals and the pelvic floor that isn't going anywhere. The other thing I sometimes do with my patients is I do diaphragmatic breathing, because your diaphragm and your pelvic floor are very connected. And really, when you breathe in, your diaphragm is supposed to move down. A lot of us breathe up like this, but it's supposed to move down, and your pelvic floor is supposed to relax. And then when you breathe out, your diaphragm moves up and your pelvic floor tightens a little bit. And that's a much more gentle way. It's not quite a Kegel, but it is breathing all the way down to your pelvic floor and letting it relax on the in-breath, and then letting it from your pelvic floor take the out-breath all the way up and out. And that might be a good way of doing it if your shaman thinks the Kegels are a bit too concentrated. Do you have any knowledge about shamanic attitudes to Kegel exercises?
I mean, I think you explained that really beautifully. Like, I talk a lot about with women about this because we're so ingrained in our culture, like tighten, hold, push, 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 go, go, go. And so we hear Kegels and we're like, we want to be tighter. We want to like enjoy sex more. And it's constantly this like squeeze and tighten. And I think there's a lot to be explored in the releasing. So we can even try it right now if we have a few moments. And you can explore that in just relaxing your body and feeling your pelvic floor. If you want, you can even put your hand underneath and just cup so you can get a sensation feeling. And then you can breathe in. So imagining that you have a straw coming up from your genitals and you're sipping that air, you're pulling that air, you're drawing it up your genitals, and you can feel it coming all the way up to your navel and holding there, squeezing. And now you're releasing, you're letting that air go, and you're gently, just like an elevator, coming down, all the way back down. And then it's kind of, you can even try bearing down. So the push, like as if you're going to have a bowel movement, just pressing down and feeling what that feels like. So it's a full relaxation to a push. And I think that is the full extent of a Kegel, really embodying the squeeze and the tighten, and then the release and the let go. And something that also is really incredible to practice is anal breathing. So practicing that same breath and release through your anus, and it's incredible. We have so many sensations and nerves in our anus. So once we do that, we can really relax the nervous system.
Thank you. That was fun. That was fun. And actually, I thank you for asking that question, because I think there is a bit of sort of competitive Kegel going on, and getting tighter. And it's not supposed to be like, a sort of weightlifting exercise. And you're right. So that question provoked us to talk about the release and the relaxation. It's good. What about another question, Emma?
So someone asked us, I would love advice on finding a sexual connection to myself. I'm single, but I fear that I may be putting up walls against intimacy.
Yeah. Simone, why don't you take that one first?
Yeah, that's great. I think checking in with yourself and asking, where are these walls coming from? Is it protective? Is it because of a past experience? And what is it that you're really wanting to call into your life right now? And getting familiar with where it is, sexually and intimately, how you want to connect with the partner, and going from there. Um, Yeah, can you read the question again? I just want to make sure I'm.
I realized I was on mute. Yes, of course. So they would love advice on finding sexual connection with themselves. The context being that they're single and they're worried that they're putting up walls against intimacy.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're working on building it with yourself, I think slow, like, rituals that you can incorporate into your daily life, like after you get out of the shower, rubbing lotion all over your body, really just nourishing yourself and appreciating your body, your mind, like even doing an eye gazing exercise with yourself and just seeing what comes up. These are so many like vulnerable, intimate moments that we rarely give ourselves, or our partners, but really we don't give ourselves that same kind of love. And incorporating that touch into self pleasure, and really just exploring, like kind of pretending like you're a child again, and seeing where you can be playful and be curious and what sparks your interest. What do you have to say, Jill?
I like that answer. Be playful. I think we inherit messages about masturbation and our bodies that stay with us, and it can make us a little disconnected. So just even acknowledging that, you don't have to relive whatever anybody told you, or you don't have to get too attached to the story, but I would start to just breathe that story out. Almost like off-gassing, before you start to ask your body what feels delicious, just breathe out that story that is not yours, that was projected onto you, and start with a fresh beginner's mind again, and find out what feels good, what feels delicious, what feels awesome. And I think women are men too, but I treat a lot of women, and women are very critical about their bodies. I am too. And it can set up some embattlement that when you're having a relationship with yourself, if you're criticizing yourself, you wouldn't be relating to a partner who was doing that. If you had a partner who was telling you look terrible, and you would shut down. And it's the same with your own mind. And so making a commitment not to just constantly pick away at the bits of you that you have decided are less than perfect. We're all less than perfect. Like, we've all got bits of us that, don't look like whatever we've been taught we're supposed to look like. But we're us. This is it. This is our body. This is what we live in. And if you can connect to the miraculousness of your body, the rhythm of your body, the rhythm of the moon and how it affects your body, the annual rhythm of the sun and how it affects your body, how your body's related to the earth, how you breathe in oxygen and then breathe out carbon dioxide, and the plants and the trees breathe it in, and feel how much your body is part of this beautiful, beautiful earth that we live in. And don't nitpick. Don't nitpick on the, I don't know, I have one breast bigger than the other, or, I've got cellulite, or whatever it is that you throw at yourself, and make a commitment not to. Because if you're going to, you can't really have a good physical and emotional and intimate relationship with someone else until you've developed a good relationship with yourself. Otherwise, you're always hiding bits of you, which is a real barrier to intimacy. And so make a commitment not to endlessly treat yourself worse than you would ever treat another human being. And stop criticizing yourself, and connect to your utter miraculousness. And I think after all these years of treating fertility, I feel just in awe, particularly of women's bodies and our reproductive system, which is so extraordinarily rhythmic and creates life. I mean, our reproductive systems, men too, are the most creative part of us. And to see it as creative, not just, I actually use, this is kind of fun, I use the same points for women who tell me they're having trouble orgasming as I use for artists who tell me they have writer's block or artist block, because it's the same thing. It's a blockage of creative energy, and so I do the same. I do the same thing. Works both ways, which is kind of fun. Thank you for that question.
We actually got another question in the Q&A, and we actually had a few questions about painful sex, so I definitely wanted to make sure that we touched on this. So someone just sent in wondering if you had any suggestions for painful sex due to a past history of cancer, endometriosis, a tight pelvis, no birthing experience, and then surgical menopause.
Yes, thank you for asking that question. And of course, if your experiences have been so painful, you've retreated a lot from that area. And I think the beginning of how I would address this is to reconnect with the fact that sex isn't just genital by any means. And a lot of women with endometriosis suffer from painful sex, and I'm forever sort of encouraging them to explore whole body sexuality. And if it hurts, if penetrative sex hurts, there is so much more that you can do. And people become very fixated on the part that is painful. Yeah, and so I'm going to pass this on to Simone because I bet she has some really good ideas. But I would say broaden out your feeling of sex to involve your whole body, and then get creative and start to make friends with yourself sexually in that way. What do you say, Simone?
I wanted to hear the rest of your answer. Yeah, I think that's a great start. Definitely expanding the thought of what sex is. And again, it's that thing of like, if you're pressuring yourself to have sex, if you're kind of having this self-shame talk of like, it's not feeling good, but you're pushing yourself to go there, it's never going to feel good if you're approaching it from that way. So giving yourself some space to rest and to not have that be like the agenda. Whenever we have an agenda that we're trying to reach, but it feels challenging, our body over time is going to build up all these defenses in our nervous system. And so we want to back away from that. And we want to try approaching it from a softer way, a way that brings us more curiosity again, playfulness, imagination. And one thing that I do in my practice as well in sexological bodywork is scar tissue remediation. So this is something that happens a lot with people that have had these kind of things happen with their body or even post-birth, is just going in and feeling externally and then internally and searching for scar tissue. So you can do this on your own, or you can reach out to a sexological body worker, where then you meet the scar tissue and you remediate the scar tissue with castor oil. So castor oil is really high in linoleic acid, and it basically like meets the scar tissue and helps melt it away. And then doing that with intention, and then speaking to the emotions that occurred during any of your healing processes or any kind of pain or trauma that happened in the body. And so then you're meeting the body from this place of intrigue. You're asking your body to reveal what kind of stories it has. You're letting these emotions release from your body. And once we do that, things soften. And I'm sure you have a lot of experience with this with acupuncture, because it meets the body in the same way as far as releasing the nervous system and
Yes,
just creating those flows, energy flows. Mm-hmm.
I also think that if you've had a history of painful sex and you have a partner, there's some communication that needs to go on to exploring what feels good. I've had men whose wives have suffered from dyspareunia tell me how nervous they get. You know, they love their wife, they don't want to hurt them, things hurt, and slowly they retreat away from the things that hurt. And so a sort of very loving conversation about what feels good, and that could be fun. Like you could go and find out together what feels good, what makes your body feel good, and explore your other erogenous zones, even your surprising ones. They may not be where women's magazines say they're supposed to be. Massage often feels good. You know what sometimes feels good, and sometimes I send people home to do very light massage with powder, like cornstarch massage, can feel really good. And that very light massage, you suddenly discover parts of your body you had no idea were that pleasurable. And so I think a discussion to deal with their fear of hurting you, so that it's a situation you tackle together, is probably really helpful.
Thank you. We had another question, which I wanted to read out loud. It says, it was said earlier, breathe out the story that doesn't belong to you, which I resonated with deeply. And they wondered what your thoughts or tips are on healing from sexual experiences in which were traumatic or non-consensual.
This is, I deal with this a lot. And the sad thing is, I think that so many women have had traumatic sexual experiences. And it just breaks my heart now that I'm, older. And I think back and I think, would the world be different? And we must fight for a different world where women don't deal with this. And I understand men deal with it too. So the first thing to deal with is, I actually think that obviously therapy is very helpful, and reframing this experience is helpful, and understanding how it's impacted you is helpful. But there's a point where story just becomes story, and you're still living in this traumatic incident. And the first thing I do with patients is we do work on what it is to be truly present. The past has gone. It is gone. It doesn't exist at all except in your memory. And it doesn't mean that your memory should be discounted, but it just doesn't exist. And I think when we've been traumatized, we can be triggered into reliving this experience over and over again. And our triggers are very personal, and could be the color of the school uniform you were wearing. It could be the smell of someone. It could be anything. And it starts to, you start to behave as if it's still going on. At that point, and this is just a very sort of energetic take on this, I do a sort of somatic energy work with my patients. At that point, I try and help people identify where they have what I call a pain body, where they store pain energetically in their body. And then what we do, you can't move pain and stuck energy with force. You can only move it with love and acceptance. Is we breathe and we just put love there. We put light there, and you'll feel the pain body start to expand, and the story will bubble up. And at that point, I usually encourage people not to get too entranced by the story. We know what, you know what the story is, but to breathe it out as if they're off gassing, like, and just move that energy in your body, because this is not still going on. There is nothing that exists except the present moment. The future hasn't started yet. And in fact, it creates itself over and over again from this present. So to a certain extent, there is just one long present, and the past has completely gone. And so what keeps it alive is the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think letting them go requires more than just reframing them intellectually with your mind. It requires just letting them go from your body, by bringing light and awareness to them. And so I do a lot of that work with patients, actually, and I'm really grateful you answered that question. And I'm sorry for whatever was done to you. It breaks my heart that people have such disempowering sexual experiences. The route to healing, in my opinion, is to take your power back over your sexuality. And at that point, you've moved this into your distant past. What about you, Simone?
Yeah, you explained that really beautifully, and that's also how I approach that kind of situation as well. And it is very unfortunate, and I meet this a lot with with a lot of my clients that have embedded ancestral trauma as well. So I think that, there's so much of it that we're carrying in this body right now. And yeah, just working that way with the breath, with letting that story go. There's also ways to do it with fantasy work, repetition with agency. So creating those kind of fantasies where you have agency of what's going on, that can be really healing as well.
That's a very good idea. Yeah, writing your new story is a good idea. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
And Emma.
So I think we're almost coming to an end. We might have room for one or two more questions. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and sending the questions that you had sent, and for helping us have such an interesting and informative discussion. I guess one thing that might be interesting to hear would be, what would be both of your pieces of advice or the go-to takeaways that you would want people who joined us this evening to take with them into their lives?
I'll go first so Simone gets a moment to think. I would say one of the things that I would like to give you is sex is very energetic. It is about an energetic connection with yourself, as in moving energy around your own body. Sexual pleasure is about moving energy around your body, and it's about an energetic connection with other people. And that is the result of some open-heartedness, I think, towards someone else. And as someone, we're at different ages, Simone and I, but I'm growing old with someone. Someone's a different age. And I have to tell you that as my husband sort of ages, I feel great tenderness towards the bits of him that, have changed over the years. And that is part of loving someone. And so don't be critical of yourself, and create energetic connection with another human being, because it is part of your birthright.
Love it. Yeah, mine would be to just explore and be curious and meet yourself where you are right now. And gosh, I feel like I've made all of my best decisions when I was in a place of pleasure and in my body. So any kind of like inhibitions or shame or questioning, just connect with your body wherever it is right now, and have fun and play and be curious. We're very fortunate right now that there's so much like good information about sex. There's a lot of bad information, but there's a lot of good resources like Yinova, like practitioners like myself, where you can really expand your knowledge and your experience with yourself. So yeah, just continue to be curious and try.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I think those are all of our questions, or at least all that we have time for today. So thank you, Jill and Simone, for being so open with us, with your information and your wisdom. And to everyone who joined, we'll send a little follow-up email with some more information on the topics we covered, as well as how to get in touch with Simone and Jill.
Oh, I thought there was another question, but it was someone saying thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. This was a lovely discussion. Thank you for your interesting questions. Thank you to lovely Simone, who I bet is a fabulous sex and intimacy coach. And thank you, Yinova marketing team, Emma, for putting on a lovely, smooth webinar like you always do. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Pleasure to work with you guys.
Mwah.
Wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you. Hi.